The security cameras don't lie, and neither do credit card statements. I'm Isabella Conklin, 29 years old, and I never thought I'd be sitting in a Phoenix airport at 2 a.m. booking the last flight home to find my father dying alone, while my mother was hitting jackpots in Las Vegas. She told the hospital staff she was visiting her sick sister in Portland, but Instagram stories don't lie either. Mom was celebrating her girls' weekend with champagne and slot machines, while Dad's heart monitor flatlined 3 states away. Have you ever discovered that everything you believed about your family was a carefully constructed lie? Drop a comment below and subscribe, because what I found when I got home wasn't just medical neglect. It was a betrayal so deep it changed everything I thought I knew about the woman who raised me. By the end of this story, you'll see how I didn't just save my father's life, I exposed a web of lies that had been 20 years in the making. Let me take you back to where this nightmare began, because the truth is always stranger than fiction, and my mother's fiction was about to crumble in the most spectacular way possible. It started with a phone call that should have come from Mom, but didn't. Instead, it was Mrs. Rivera, our elderly neighbor from Millbrook Heights, her voice shaking as she whispered into the phone at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday. "Isabella, honey, I think something's wrong with your father. I heard him calling for help through the walls, but your mother's car hasn't been in the driveway for 3 days. 3 days. My stomach dropped like an elevator with cut cables. I was in my downtown Seattle apartment, 1,200 miles away, building software solutions for Fortune 500 companies. I'd worked my way up from a community college graduate to a senior developer making 6 figures by 28. But in that moment, all my success felt meaningless. My father needed me, and I wasn't there. "Mrs. Rivera, have you tried calling Mom?" I asked, already knowing something was terribly wrong. My parents, Daniel and Carmen Conklin, had been married for 34 years. Carmen was a devoted wife, or so I'd always believed. She managed Dad's medical appointments, his medications, his entire world since his first heart attack 2 years ago. She wouldn't just disappear. "I tried, Mija, but her phone goes straight to voicemail." "It's been going straight to voicemail since Sunday." Sunday? That was 4 days ago. I was already pulling up flight booking websites, my fingers trembling as I typed. The earliest flight to Phoenix was 6 a.m., 5 hours away. I could drive to the airport, sleep in my car if I had to. "Mrs. Rivera, I need you to call 911. Tell them it's a wellness check for Daniel Conklin at 847 Sagebrush Drive. Tell them his daughter is flying in from Seattle and his wife is unreachable. Can you do that for me?" "Of course, honey." I should have called sooner, but I kept thinking Carmen would come back. She always comes back. But she hadn't come back. And as I threw clothes into a suitcase with one hand while booking flights with the other, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just about Dad's health. Something deeper was wrong. Something that would explain why my mother's phone had been off for 4 days without a word to anyone. The 5-hour wait at SeaTac Airport felt like torture. I called Mom's phone 17 times. Each call went directly to voicemail. I texted her, messaged her on Facebook, even tried reaching her through her book club friends' social media accounts. Nothing. Radio silence from a woman who usually called me twice a week to ask about my love life and when I was going to give her grandchildren. That's when I made the mistake of checking Instagram. I wasn't even following my mother on social media. We'd connected years ago, but rarely interacted online. She mostly posted pictures of her garden and Dad's woodworking projects. Wholesome, boring, predictable content that matched the wholesome, boring, predictable woman I thought I knew. But her most recent story, posted 18 hours ago, wasn't wholesome at all. It was a video of champagne glasses clinking together, casino lights flashing in the background, and my mother's laugh, a laugh I recognized instantly, echoing over the sound of slot machines. The location tag read Bellagio, Las Vegas, Nevada. The caption read, "Girls Weekend in Sin City, what happens in Vegas," followed by laughing emojis. My phone slipped from my hands and clattered to the airport floor. A businessman nearby looked over with concern, but I couldn't speak. I couldn't breathe. While Dad was alone, possibly dying, calling for help through thin walls that only Mrs. Rivera could hear, my mother was celebrating in Las Vegas like she was 21 again. I scrolled frantically through her posts from the past week. Friday, road trip with my favorite ladies. Saturday, checking into paradise. Monday, jackpot, baby! And yesterday, one more night in Sin City. One more night. While Dad was lying alone, potentially having another heart attack, struggling to reach a phone, wondering where his wife of 34 years had gone. The boarding announcement for my flight echoed through the terminal, but I was already mentally preparing for war. Because this wasn't just medical neglect, this was abandonment. This was betrayal. And as I would soon discover, this Vegas trip was just the tip of an iceberg that had been forming for years, while I'd been too busy building my career to notice the cracks in my parents' marriage.
By the time I landed in Phoenix, I wouldn't just be racing to save my father's life. I'd be uncovering secrets that would change everything I thought I knew about the woman who taught me to tie my shoes, helped me with homework, and told me every day that family comes first. Some lessons you learn the hard way, and I was about to get an education that would cost everything. If you've ever felt that sick feeling in your stomach when you realize someone you trusted has been lying to your face, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Hit that subscribe button right now because this story gets darker than you can imagine. And I promise you, by the end of this video, you'll understand why sometimes the people closest to us are the ones capable of the deepest betrayal. I'm about to tell you how I didn't just save my father's life that night. I uncovered a 15-year pattern of deception that involved secret bank accounts, fake medical emergencies, and a mother who had been systematically stealing from her dying husband while playing the role of devoted caregiver. And the Vegas trip, that was just her victory lap. Drop a comment below if you've ever had to choose between protecting a parent and exposing the truth about the other one, because that's exactly where this story is heading, and your engagement helps me know I'm not alone in facing impossible family situations like this. But first, let me tell you about the phone call that changed everything. The one that came while I was still 35,000 feet in the air, completely unaware that my emergency was about to become someone else's crime scene. The flight from Seattle to Phoenix Sky Harbor felt like the longest 3 hours of my life. I kept checking my phone during the brief moments when we had Wi-Fi, hoping for some miracle message from Mom explaining everything. Maybe there was a reasonable explanation. Maybe she'd gotten food poisoning and lost her phone. Maybe the Instagram posts were old, posted automatically by some app. Maybe I was overreacting. But deep down, I knew better. You don't survive 29 years in a dysfunctional family without developing a sixth sense for when something is catastrophically wrong. And my internal alarm system was screaming. The pilot's voice crackled over the intercom as we began our initial approach into Phoenix. Ladies and gentlemen, we're beginning our initial approach. Current temperature is 94 degrees with clear skies. Clear skies. If only my family situation was that transparent. I turned on my phone the moment we touched down, and immediately it exploded with notifications. 7 missed calls from Mrs. Rivera, 3 from an unknown Phoenix number, 2 voicemails. My heart hammered against my ribs as I pressed play on the first message. Isabella, it's Rosa Rivera. The paramedics came. They took your father to Desert Valley Medical Center. He's alive, honey, but... She cracked. It was bad. Real bad. He'd been on the floor for hours, maybe since yesterday. The house, Mija, the house was in terrible condition. No food in the refrigerator, medication bottles everywhere, some empty, some expired. Where is your mother? The second voicemail was from Dr. Patricia Kellerman at the hospital. Ms. Conklin, this is regarding your father, Daniel Conklin. He's stable but critical. We need to speak with you about his condition and some concerning circumstances surrounding his care. Please call as soon as possible. Concerning circumstances. In medical speak, that meant they suspected neglect or abuse. I was running through the terminal now, past confused travelers and janitors, my suitcase wheels screaming against the polished floor. The Uber driver took one look at my face and didn't ask questions when I told him to break speed limits getting to Desert Valley Medical. But here's what you need to understand, and this is where the story gets truly insane. I was still thinking like a daughter trying to save my father's life. I wasn't thinking like someone about to uncover a criminal conspiracy. I wasn't prepared for what Dr. Kellerman was going to tell me in that sterile hospital room, or how my mother's Vegas trip was about to become evidence in a case that would destroy everything I thought I knew about my family. Because while I was frantically trying to reach Mom, calling her friends, her book club, even her dental office to see if she'd mentioned travel plans, someone else was already investigating her. Someone with access to bank records, insurance claims, and medical histories that painted a very different picture of Carmen Conklin than the devoted wife and mother I'd grown up believing in. And here's the kicker. The reason I'm sharing this story with all of you today, Mom wasn't in Vegas celebrating with girlfriends. She was celebrating something much more sinister. Something that would make her jackpot winnings look like pocket change compared to what she thought she was about to inherit. If you think you know where this story is going, trust me, because the woman who taught me to braid my hair and helped me with algebra homework wasn't just neglecting her husband. She was actively, methodically, patiently waiting for him to die. And she almost got away with it. I want you to imagine arriving at a hospital at midnight, exhausted and terrified, only to discover that your family emergency is actually someone's carefully planned crime. I want you to imagine sitting in a waiting room, watching security footage that shows your mother leaving your father on the floor, stepping over him to get her suitcase, and driving away with a smile on her face. Now imagine realizing that this moment, this exact scenario, was what she'd been planning for years.
Hit that like button if you believe that sometimes the people we trust most are capable of the unthinkable, because I'm about to show you exactly how deep this rabbit hole goes and why my mother's Vegas trip was actually the biggest mistake she ever made. The truth has a way of surfacing, especially when someone gets too confident, too careless, and too greedy. And my mother, as I was about to discover, had been all three for a very long time. Stay with me, because part 3 is where this family drama turns into a criminal investigation, and where I learned that sometimes saving someone's life means destroying someone else's lies. Desert Valley Medical Center smelled like disinfectant and desperation. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as I rushed through the automatic doors at 12:47 a.m., my suitcase wheels echoing through empty corridors that seemed to stretch forever. The receptionist, a tired-looking woman named Janet, according to her badge, barely looked up as I approached. "I'm Isabella Conklin. My father, Daniel Conklin, was brought in by ambulance tonight. I need to see him immediately." Janet's fingers clicked across her keyboard with practiced efficiency, but her expression shifted as she read whatever appeared on her screen. "One moment, please. Dr. Kellerman asked to be notified the moment you arrived." She picked up a phone and spoke in hushed tones that made my stomach churn. Within minutes, Dr. Patricia Kellerman appeared, a woman in her 50s with silver-streaked hair and the kind of direct gaze that suggested she'd seen everything the human condition could offer. She wasn't smiling. "Ms. Conklin, thank you for coming so quickly. Let's talk in my office first, then I'll take you to see your father." First. That word carried weight I didn't want to acknowledge. In hospitals, first usually meant bad news, questions, or both. Her office was cramped but organized, medical journals stacked precisely beside a computer displaying what I assumed were my father's charts. Dr. Kellerman gestured to a chair across from her desk, but I remained standing. I needed to be ready to run, to act, to do whatever it took. "Your father is stable, but he's been through significant trauma, severe dehydration, malnutrition, and what appears to be medication mismanagement. His heart condition has worsened considerably." She paused, studying my face carefully. "Miss Conklin, when was the last time you visited your parents?" 6 months ago, maybe 7. I live in Seattle. I work long hours, but we talk regularly on the phone. Mom always said Dad was doing well, that she was taking good care of him." My voice sounded defensive even to my own ears. Dr. Kellerman opened a folder and slid several photographs across her desk. They were pictures of my childhood home, the kitchen, the living room, Dad's bedroom. But these weren't the rooms I remembered. The kitchen counters were covered in empty medication bottles, some dating back years. Dirty dishes were stacked in the sink, and the refrigerator, visible in one photo with its door open, contained only expired milk and moldy leftovers. The paramedics took these photographs as part of their standard procedure when they suspect neglect or unsafe living conditions, Dr. Kellerman explained gently. Your father was found on the bathroom floor. Based on his condition and the evidence at the scene, we estimate he'd been there for at least 12 to 15 hours, possibly longer. I stared at the photographs, trying to reconcile them with the cheerful updates Mom had been giving me for months. She told me just 3 weeks ago that she deep cleaned the house, that Dad was eating well, that his new medication was working wonderfully. But this doesn't make sense. My mother takes care of everything. She manages all his medications, his doctor appointments, his diet. She sends me updates constantly about how he's doing. Dr. Kellerman's expression grew more serious. Ms. Conklin, I need to ask you directly. When was the last time you spoke to your mother? Sunday night. She called to tell me about Dad's checkup on Friday, said everything looked great, that Dr. Martinez was pleased with his progress. I felt the words stick in my throat as I realized the timeline. Sunday night was the same day the Instagram post from Vegas started appearing. We've been trying to reach your mother since your father was admitted. The contact information we have shows her phone going directly to voicemail, and the emergency contacts listed in his medical files, your Aunt Margaret and Uncle Robert, told us they haven't heard from Carmen in over 2 weeks. 2 weeks. Not 4 days like I thought. 2 weeks of silence from a woman who called her sister every other day without fail. Dr. Kellerman pulled out another document, this one official looking with the hospital letterhead. There's something else we need to discuss. Your father's medical insurance has been problematic. Several claims have been denied due to inconsistencies in the paperwork, and there are questions about some of the medications he's been prescribed. What kind of inconsistencies? Medications that weren't prescribed by his cardiologist, Dr. Martinez. Medications that could actually be harmful given his condition. And pharmacy records show prescriptions being filled at multiple locations across the city, sometimes on the same day. She leaned forward, her voice dropping to almost a whisper. Miss Conklin, in my 23 years of practice, I've learned to recognize patterns. What I'm seeing here suggests your mother may not have been providing appropriate care for your father. The room felt like it was tilting. I gripped the back of the chair I'd refused to sit in, my knuckles white against the brown leather. Are you saying she was hurting him?
I'm saying that neglect can be just as dangerous as active harm, and some of the medications found in your father's system should never have been combined with his heart medication. If Mrs. Rivera hadn't called 911 when she did, your father likely wouldn't have survived the night. Mrs. Rivera, our 78-year-old neighbor, had done what my mother should have been doing, checking on Dad, caring about his welfare, recognizing when something was wrong. Dr. Kellerman, there's something else you need to know. I pulled out my phone and showed her Mom's Instagram stories from Vegas. My mother isn't visiting a sick sister in Portland. She's been in Las Vegas for at least 5 days, apparently with friends, celebrating and gambling, while Dad was alone. Dr. Kellerman's professional composure cracked slightly as she watched the videos of my mother laughing and toasting with champagne. Miss Conklin, I need to ask you to save these videos and any other evidence of your mother's whereabouts during the time your father was in crisis. This situation may require involvement from Adult Protective Services. Adult Protective Services. The words hit me like ice water. We were officially in criminal territory now. Can I see him? Can I see my father? Of course, but I want to prepare you. He's been asking for your mother constantly. He doesn't understand why she isn't here. He keeps saying she must be stuck in traffic or that her phone must be broken. He has no idea she left town. As we walked down the corridor toward Dad's room, Dr. Kellerman continued talking, but her words felt distant and muffled. Something about 24-hour observation, about the need for a comprehensive medical evaluation, about the importance of family support during recovery. But all I could think about was the man who'd taught me to ride a bike, who'd helped me with calculus homework, who'd cried when I graduated college. Lying alone on a bathroom floor, calling for a wife who was 400 miles away, counting her casino winnings. And somewhere in the back of my mind, a terrible question was forming. If Mom had been planning this Vegas trip, if she'd known Dad was getting worse, if she'd been mismanaging his medications for months or even years, what exactly had she been planning for him while she was gone? The answer to that question was waiting for me in room 247, along with a man who still believed his wife of 34 years was coming back to save him. He had no idea that I was about to discover she'd been trying to kill him. Room 247 was quieter than I had expected. The only sounds were the steady beeping of heart monitors and the soft hiss of oxygen flowing through clear tubes. Dad looked smaller than I remembered, diminished somehow, as if the last 6 months had aged him a decade. His silver hair was thin and uncombed, his skin pale and papery against the white hospital sheets. But when he saw me, his face lit up with the same smile I'd known my entire life. "Bella, my little girl, you came. I knew you'd come. Did you see your mother in the hallway? She was just here a minute ago, I think. Or maybe that was yesterday. Time gets funny in these places." I pulled the uncomfortable hospital chair closer to his bed and took his hand. It felt fragile, like bird bones wrapped in tissue paper. "Dad, I came as soon as I heard. How are you feeling?" "Oh, you know me. Tough as an old boot." He tried to sit up straighter, wincing with the effort. "Your mother's been taking such good care of me at home. I don't know what I did to deserve that woman. She's been running herself ragged, poor thing. That's probably why she's not here. She's probably at home catching up on sleep." My throat tightened. He genuinely believed this. In his mind, Carmen was the devoted wife who'd been sacrificing everything for his care. The evidence of neglect, the medications that could have killed him, the days of abandonment, none of it registered in his narrative of their perfect marriage. "Dad, when did you last eat a real meal? At home, I mean." He looked confused by the question. "Your mother makes sure I eat. She's always bringing me something. Soup, sandwiches, those protein shakes the doctor recommended. Why, did someone say I looked thin? I've been trying to keep my weight up, but this heart medication kills my appetite sometimes." I remembered the empty refrigerator in the photos Dr. Kellerman had shown me. Dad might think he was eating regular meals, but the evidence suggested otherwise. Either he was confused about the timeline, or Mom had been giving him just enough food to keep him alive, but not thriving. "Tell me about your medications, Dad. How do you keep track of all of them?" "Oh, Carmen handles all that. Smart woman, your mother. She's got this whole system worked out. Pills sorted by day, times written on each bottle. She even researches all the interactions and side effects online. Talks to the pharmacist, asks the doctors questions I wouldn't even think of. She squeezed my hand weakly. "I'm lucky to have her, Bella. Not every man gets a wife who becomes a medical expert just to take care of him."
Medical expert. The phrase made my skin crawl, especially knowing what Dr. Kellerman had told me about the dangerous drug combinations found in his system. If Mom was researching medications and interactions, she knew exactly what she was doing when she mixed drugs that shouldn't be combined. "Dad, I need to ask you something, and I want you to really think about the answer. When you fell in the bathroom, how long were you there before the paramedics came?" His eyes grew distant, and for the first time since I'd arrived, uncertainty crossed his face. That's hard to remember. I remember falling, hitting my head on the sink. I remember calling for Carmen, but she must not have heard me. The house gets loud sometimes with the air conditioning running. He paused, struggling with the memory. I kept thinking she'd come check on me when I didn't come to bed. She always worries when I'm in the bathroom too long. But she didn't come? Well, no, but he looked genuinely puzzled. She must have been sleeping really deeply.
She's been so tired lately, working so hard to take care of me. I wouldn't want to wake her up just because I took a little tumble. A little tumble that left him dehydrated, malnourished, and nearly dead. But in his mind, he was protecting her, making excuses for her absence even when that absence had almost killed him. I pulled out my phone, knowing I had to show him, but dreading his reaction. Dad, I need you to see something. Mom isn't sleeping at home. She's been in Las Vegas for the past 5 days. I showed him the Instagram videos, Mom laughing with her friends, champagne glasses clinking, casino lights flashing in the background. His face went through a series of expressions: confusion, disbelief, hurt, and then something that broke my heart: desperate rationalization. That can't be right. Those videos must be old. She would never. She was just here yesterday. Or was it the day before? He stared at the screen, his breathing becoming more rapid. Maybe it's her sister Margaret. They look similar sometimes. Carmen would never leave me alone when I'm sick. The heart monitor's beeping increased in frequency. A nurse appeared in the doorway, checking the display with concern. Mr. Conklin, I need you to take some deep breaths for me. Your heart rate is elevated. She looked at me with a meaningful expression. Perhaps we should let your father rest. The dad wasn't done processing what he'd seen. Bella, there has to be an explanation. My mother loves me. We've been married 34 years. She gave up her career to take care of me after the first heart attack. She wouldn't leave me. The nurse was adjusting his IV now, probably adding something to calm him down. I realized I was traumatizing a man who'd already been through hell, but he needed to understand the truth. His life might depend on it. Dad, when Mom told you she was visiting Aunt Margaret in Portland, what exactly did she say? She said Margaret had fallen and broken her hip, that she needed help for a few days. She kissed me goodbye, told me to be good while she was gone, said she'd call me every day. Did she call you? The silence stretched long enough that I thought he'd fallen asleep, but then, so quietly I almost missed it. No, but I figured the hospital wouldn't let her use her phone much. Hospital. Not Margaret's house where someone with a broken hip would be recovering. He'd automatically assumed Margaret was hospitalized, which meant Mom's story hadn't even been consistent. Dad, I need you to tell you something important. Aunt Margaret is fine. She never broke her hip. I called her tonight from the airport. She hasn't heard from Mom in 2 weeks. The heart monitor was beeping faster again, despite the medication. Dad's eyes filled with tears, but not tears of sadness, tears of confusion, of a worldview crumbling in real time. The nurse was back this time with reinforcements, another nurse, and what looked like a supervisor. I'm going to have to ask you to step outside, Miss Conklin. Your father needs to stabilize. As I stood to leave, Dad grabbed my wrist with surprising strength. Bella, don't tell anyone about those videos, please. There has to be an explanation. My mother loves me. She's a good woman. She's been under so much stress. Even now, even after seeing proof of her betrayal, he was protecting her reputation. But I wasn't going to protect anyone anymore, because the more I learned about Mom's caregiving, the more I realized Dad's life had been in danger long before this Vegas trip. And if I was right about what I was starting to suspect, this wasn't neglect at all. This was attempted murder, planned and executed over months or possibly years, with a Vegas celebration as the finale. The hallway outside Dad's room felt like a courtroom where I was both prosecutor and jury, trying to piece together evidence that painted my mother as someone I'd never known. 3 nurses bustled around the medication cart nearby, their hushed conversations about concerning patient histories and family dynamics, making it clear that Dad's case was already generating paperwork beyond standard medical care. Dr. Kellerman found me there 20 minutes later, clutching a coffee that had gone cold while I stared at the linoleum floor tiles and tried to make sense of 34 years of what I'd thought was a happy marriage. "How is he?" she asked, settling into the plastic chair beside me. Confused, heartbroken, still making excuses for her. I looked up at her tired face. "Dr. Kellerman, I need to know exactly what medications were in his system when he was brought in, and I need to know what they were supposed to do versus what they actually did." She pulled out a tablet and scrolled through what I assumed were Dad's test results. "Your father's blood work showed therapeutic levels of his prescribed heart medication, lisinopril, which is normal, but we also found significant amounts of diphenhydramine, sulfidem, and lorazepam." The names meant nothing to me, but her tone suggested they should. "In English, please?" Benadryl, Ambien, and Ativan. Allergy medication, sleep aids, and anti-anxiety medication. Individually, they're relatively harmless when used as directed, but combined, especially in an elderly patient with heart conditions, they can cause severe drowsiness, confusion, dangerous drops in blood pressure, and respiratory depression. My stomach dropped, meaning someone was either very careless with medication management or very deliberate about creating a dangerous combination. She leaned forward, lowering her voice. "Ms. Conklin, these medications would have made your father increasingly confused, disoriented, and physically weak over time. They would have made it nearly impossible for him to advocate for himself or recognize that something was wrong." The pieces were clicking together in a way that made me sick. Mom hadn't just been neglecting Dad. She'd been systematically drugging him to keep him compliant and helpless. The perfect caregiving wife was actually the perfect predator. How long would this have been going on to get those levels in his system? Based on the concentrations, I'd estimate regular dosing for at least several weeks, possibly months. These aren't medications that would show up accidentally or from a single incident of confusion. Months. Well, I'd been in Seattle, proud of my successful career, and taking Mom's word that everything was fine. She'd been slowly poisoning the man who'd loved and trusted him for over 3 decades. "Dr. Kellerman, I need to see those pharmacy records you mentioned. Every prescription, every location, every date. And I need copies of everything for when the police get involved." "The police?" Her eyebrows raised. "Ms. Conklin, while this situation is certainly concerning, Adult Protective Services typically handles—" "No." I stood up, pacing the small waiting area. "This isn't neglect. This is attempted murder. My mother deliberately gave him medications that could have killed him, then left town so she wouldn't be here when it happened. The Vegas trip wasn't a vacation. It was an alibi." Dr. Kellerman's expression shifted from professional concern to something much more serious. "That's a significant accusation. Do you have evidence beyond the medication interactions?" I pulled out my phone and started scrolling through Mom's social media posts from the past week, screenshotting everything. She told Dad she was visiting her sister with a broken hip, but the sister is fine, and these posts show her planning this trip for days, maybe weeks. Look at this one from last Thursday. "Packing for adventure" with suitcase emojis. That's 2 days before she told Dad about the emergency with Aunt Margaret. I showed her another post, this one from a week earlier. "Sometimes you have to take care of yourself first. Hashtag self-care, hashtag new beginnings." And another from 10 days ago. "Researching the best places for a fresh start. Hashtag Vegas, hashtag new chapter." Dr. Kellerman, she wasn't planning a weekend getaway. She was planning a new life. And the only way she could start over is if Dad wasn't in the picture anymore. The doctor studied the posts with growing alarm. "Ms. Conklin, I think we need to contact the authorities immediately. This goes far beyond medical neglect." But before I could respond, my phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "Isabella, this is Detective Sarah Chen with Phoenix PD. Mrs. Rivera asked me to contact you. I'm investigating some concerns about your father's welfare. Can we meet tonight?"
Detective Chen. Mrs. Rivera hadn't just called for a wellness check. She'd called the police. Our elderly neighbor, bless her heart, had been suspicious enough to involve law enforcement. I showed the message to Dr. Kellerman, who nodded grimly. I'll compile all the medical records and test results for the detective. This is going to require a full investigation. 20 minutes later, I was sitting in the hospital cafeteria across from Detective Sarah Chen, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s who looked like she'd seen every type of human cruelty imaginable. She recorded our conversation on her phone while taking notes in a leather notebook that had seen better days. Mrs. Rivera called us 3 days ago. She said your mother's behavior had been strange for weeks, leaving at odd hours, being secretive about her activities, and most concerning, she heard your father calling for help on multiple occasions with no response from your mother. 3 days ago? But Dad was just found tonight. Mrs. Rivera called for wellness checks twice this week. Both times your mother answered the door, said everything was fine, and showed the officers your father napping peacefully. The officers noted that he was heavily sedated, but responsive enough to wave hello. Heavily sedated. Mom had been timing the police visits for when Dad was most drugged, most compliant, least able to communicate that anything was wrong.
Detective Chen, my mother has been systematically poisoning my father with sleep medications and anti-anxiety drugs. She told him she was visiting her sister with a medical emergency, but she's actually been in Las Vegas for 5 days. And based on her social media posts, she's been planning this trip for weeks while increasing his medication to dangerous levels. I showed her everything. The Instagram posts, the medication information from Dr. Kellerman, the timeline of Mom's lies about Aunt Margaret's supposed injury. Detective Chen's expression grew darker with each piece of evidence. Miss Conklin, this appears to be a case of elder abuse with possible attempted homicide. I need you to understand that once we move forward with this investigation, there's no going back. Your mother will be arrested when she returns from Las Vegas. Detective, my father almost died tonight. If Mrs. Rivera hadn't called 911, he would have died. My mother planned this. She drugged him, abandoned him, and went to celebrate while he was dying alone. My voice cracked with emotion I'd been holding back for hours. I don't care about going back. I care about making sure she never gets the chance to hurt him again. Detective Chen closed her notebook and looked at me with something that might have been sympathy. I'll need you to provide written statements, copies of all communications with your mother, and any financial records you might have access to. Cases like this often involve financial motives. Financial motives. I hadn't even thought about money yet, but of course there would be life insurance policies, retirement accounts, property ownership. Mom hadn't just been trying to kill Dad, she'd been positioning herself to inherit everything while playing the grieving widow. Detective, how do we get her back from Las Vegas? She has no idea that Dad's in the hospital or that we've figured out what she's been doing. We contact Las Vegas Metro Police and have her detained for questioning. With the evidence you've provided, we can hold her while we build the case. Detective Chen stood up, gathering her materials. Miss Conklin, I want you to prepare yourself for the possibility that this investigation might uncover more than just the recent abuse. In cases like this, the pattern often goes back much further than anyone initially realizes. Much further back, as in, had Mom been slowly killing Dad since his first heart attack 2 years ago? Had every medication adjustment and doctor's recommendation been another step in a long-term murder plot? I thought about all the times I'd praised Mom for being such a devoted caregiver, all the times I'd felt guilty for not helping more, all the times I'd sent flowers and thank you cards for taking such good care of Dad. I hadn't been thanking a caregiver. I'd been thanking a killer. And tomorrow, when Detective Chen made that call to Las Vegas, Mom's perfect crime was going to become her perfect downfall. The Phoenix Police Department at 4:30 a.m. was a different world than the sterile calm of the hospital. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows on Detective Chen's desk where she'd spread out a timeline that looked like something from a crime thriller. Except this thriller was my life, and the villain was the woman who'd packed my school lunches for 12 years.
Detective Chen, I need you to walk me through your mother's behavior over the past 6 months. Any changes in routine, unusual requests for money, conversations about the future, anything that seemed off at the time, even if you dismissed it. I sat in the uncomfortable metal chair, trying to organize memories that suddenly felt loaded with sinister meaning. About 4 months ago, she started asking me detailed questions about my job security, my salary, whether I was planning to move back to Arizona anytime soon. I thought she was just being a concerned mom, maybe hoping I'd come home. Detective Chen made a note. What else? She became obsessed with Dad's medical appointments. She used to complain about all the doctor's visits, but suddenly she was scheduling extra checkups, specialist consultations, getting second opinions on everything. She said she wanted to be proactive about his care. I paused, the implications hitting me. She was doctor shopping, wasn't she? Finding physicians who would prescribe what she needed? That's what we're going to find out. What about conversations regarding your father's condition? Did she ever suggest his health was declining faster than expected? The memory came back like a punch to the stomach. 3 months ago, she called me crying, said Dad had gotten confused and wandered outside in his pajamas at 2 a.m., that she'd found him sitting on the neighbor's porch completely disoriented. She was terrified he was developing dementia. Detective Chen looked up sharply. Did you talk to your father about this incident? I tried to, but when I called him the next day, he didn't remember it happening. Mom said that was part of the problem. He was having memory issues, not remembering things that scared him. I felt sick. But if she was drugging him with sleep medications, of course he would be confused and disoriented. She was creating symptoms to justify what? More medications? More control over his care? Or building a narrative for later. If your father had died, the story would be that his health had been declining rapidly, that he'd been confused and accident-prone. A grieving widow wouldn't face much scrutiny if her husband with documented health issues died at home. Detective Chen pulled out a new file. Miss Conklin, we ran a preliminary background check on your mother while you were giving your statement. She's been researching some very specific topics online.
She slid a printed sheet across the desk. It was a screenshot of search results from Mom's computer. How long does Ambien stay in system? Lisinopril drug interactions, signs of heart failure versus medication overdose, Arizona laws, intestate succession, life insurance payout timeline after death. My hands shook as I read through the list. She was researching how to kill him without getting caught. And how to profit from it. Your mother also searched for information about selling property in Arizona, cost of living in different states, and luxury retirement communities in Florida and California. Detective Chen pointed to specific entries. These searches go back 8 months, Miss Conklin. This wasn't a recent decision. 8 months? While I'd been celebrating my promotion at work, sending Mother's Day flowers, calling to check on Dad's recovery from his heart attack, Mom had been planning his murder and her escape to a new life funded by his death. Detective Chen, there's something else. About 2 months ago, Mom started hinting that I should visit more often, that time with Dad was precious and I shouldn't take it for granted. She kept saying things like, "You never know how much time you have left," and "I worry about you, regretting not spending more time with him." She was preparing you for his death, making sure you'd remember her encouraging family time, so you'd think she was a devoted wife who saw the end coming and tried to bring the family together. Detective Chen's phone buzzed. That's the forensics team. They're processing your parents' house now. Forensics team. Mom's perfect suburban home was now a crime scene, being photographed and cataloged like something from a murder documentary. What are they looking for? Medication bottles, prescription records, computer files, financial documents, anything that shows premeditation or establishes a pattern of abuse. She answered the phone, speaking in low tones with whoever was on the other end. When she hung up, her expression was grim. Miss Conklin, they found something concerning in your mother's bedroom. She showed me a photo on her phone. Mom's nightstand drawer, opened to reveal a collection of small pill bottles, some with labels scratched off, others with dates that went back over a year. Beside them was a notebook with handwritten entries, dates, times, and what looked like dosage calculations. She was keeping a drug log, recording exactly what she gave him and when. Detective Chen zoomed in on one page. Look at this entry from 6 months ago. D very sleepy today, didn't ask about morning meds, increase evening dose Tuesday. She was experimenting with dosages, documenting his reactions. I stared at the notebook pages, written in Mom's familiar handwriting, the same handwriting that had signed birthday cards and grocery lists and permission slips throughout my childhood. Now it was evidence of a systematic poisoning campaign. There's more, Detective Chen continued. They found printed emails between your mother and someone named Victoria Reeves discussing retirement plans and new beginnings after Daniel's situation resolves itself. Miss Reeves appears to be the friend your mother traveled to Las Vegas with. Victoria Reeves. I'd heard that name before. Mom's book club friend, the one who'd gotten a divorce last year and moved to Nevada, the one Mom had started spending more time with, taking day trips and having long phone conversations that stopped abruptly when I walked into the room. Detective, Victoria got a huge divorce settlement. Mom was always talking about how free Victoria was, how lucky she was to start over at 62. I think Victoria might have been coaching her through this. We'll be investigating Miss Reeves as a possible accomplice. Conspiracy to commit murder carries the same penalties as attempted murder in Arizona. Detective Chen gathered the files. Miss Conklin, I need you to prepare you for what happens next. We're coordinating with Las Vegas PD to arrest your mother this morning. She'll be transported back to Phoenix within 48 hours. This morning. In a few hours, Mom would go from celebrating her freedom in a luxury casino to sitting in a jail cell charged with trying to murder her husband. The woman who'd taught me to make pancakes and helped me study for my SATs would be fingerprinted and photographed and read her rights. Will she know that I'm the one who turned her in? Miss Conklin, you didn't turn anyone in. You saved your father's life. Your mother's choices led to this moment, not yours. Detective Chen stood up, checking her watch. I need you to stay available for questioning over the next few days. This case is going to move quickly once we have her in custody. As I walked out of the police station into the pre-dawn darkness, Phoenix stretching out in all directions under a sky just beginning to lighten, I realized that everything I'd thought I knew about my family had been a carefully constructed lie. The devoted wife and mother, the happy marriage, the loving caregiver, all of it had been a performance while she planned the ultimate betrayal. But there was one thing Mom hadn't planned, for Mrs. Rivera's vigilance, my unexpected arrival, and her own arrogance in documenting everything. Her perfect crime had been undone by the very thoroughness that she thought would protect her. In Las Vegas, she was probably waking up for another day of celebration, unaware that her jackpots were about to become evidence and her freedom was about to end. The hunter was about to become the hunted, and she had no idea the trap was already closing. I returned to Desert Valley Medical Center as the sun was rising over Phoenix, painting the desert landscape in shades of orange and pink that would have been beautiful under different circumstances. But all I could think about was facing Dad with the knowledge that his wife of 34 years had been systematically trying to kill him. The night shift was ending and the hallways buzzed with the controlled chaos of shift change. Nurses compared notes, doctors reviewed charts, and families gathered around coffee machines, all of them dealing with their own medical crises that suddenly seemed simple compared to mine. Dad was awake when I entered his room, looking more alert than he had the night before. The dangerous drug cocktail was wearing off, and for the first time in months, maybe years, his mind was clearing. It was both a blessing and a curse. He was strong enough to handle the truth, but aware enough to fully understand its implications. "Bella, sweetheart, you look exhausted. Have you been here all night?" He tried to sit up straighter, his natural instinct to take care of others still intact, despite everything he'd been through. "I've been taking care of some things, Dad. We need to talk." Something in my tone must have warned him because his expression shifted from concern to wariness. "Is this about your mother? Has something happened to Carmen?" I pulled a chair close to his bed and took his hand, the same way I had when I was 7 and needed to confess to breaking his favorite coffee mug. But this confession would shatter something far more precious than ceramic. "Dad, I need you to listen to me carefully. Mom isn't visiting Aunt Margaret. Margaret is fine. I spoke to her last night. Mom has been in Las Vegas for almost a week, gambling and celebrating with her friend Victoria." His face cycled through confusion, disbelief, and hurt, but he didn't interrupt. "The medications you've been taking, the ones Mama's been giving you,
They're not all prescribed by Dr. Martinez. Some of them are dangerous when combined with your heart medication. They've been making you confused, weak, and disoriented. That's impossible, Bella. Carmen researches everything. She talks to the pharmacist. She asks the doctors. Dad, she's been drugging you. Systematically, for months, maybe longer. The police found her drug log in her bedroom, documenting doses and your reactions like you were a lab experiment. The heart monitor started beeping past her, but this time I didn't stop. He needed to hear everything. The night you fell in the bathroom, she didn't go to help Margaret. She packed her bags, drove to Las Vegas, and left you to die alone. If Mrs. Rivera hadn't heard you calling for help, you would have died on that bathroom floor while your wife was celebrating at a casino. Dad's free hand gripped the bed rail so tightly his knuckles went white. No, that's... Carmen loves me. She gave up her career to take care of me. Why would she want to hurt me? I pulled out my phone and showed him the evidence Detective Chen had shared. Photos of the pill bottles, pages from Mom's drug log, screenshots of her internet searches about drug interactions and life insurance payouts. She's been planning this for 8 months, Dad. She was going to let you die, collect your life insurance, sell the house, and start a new life somewhere else. The Vegas trip was supposed to be her alibi. She'd come home to find you dead and play the grieving widow. Dad stared at the evidence, his breathing becoming shallow and rapid. A nurse appeared in the doorway, checking his vitals with concern, but he waved her away. Show me the videos again, the ones from Las Vegas. I played Mom's Instagram stories from the past week, her laughing with Victoria, toasting with champagne, posing in front of slot machines with handfuls of chips. But this time I also showed him the timestamps, proving she was there since before his fall. She posted this video on Tuesday night, I explained, pointing to footage of Mom celebrating a jackpot win. You fell on Tuesday afternoon. While you were lying on that bathroom floor calling her name, she was winning money at blackjack and documenting it for social media. Dad's face crumpled, 34 years of love and trust collapsing in real time. But what broke my heart wasn't just his pain. It was his desperate attempt to rationalize the impossible. Maybe she didn't know I'd fallen. Maybe she thought I was sleeping. Carmen always worried about waking me up when I was resting. His voice trailed off as he realized how hollow his excuses sounded. Dad, she gave you enough sleep medication to knock out a horse. She knew exactly what condition you'd be in when she left. This wasn't an accident or a miscommunication. This was attempted murder. The words hung in the air between us like a death sentence. Dad closed his eyes, and for a moment I thought he was going to pass out. But when he opened them again, something had changed. The confused, trusting husband was gone, replaced by a man who was finally seeing his wife clearly for the first time in decades. How long? He asked quietly. Detective Chen thinks it started about 8 months ago, but the serious drugging has been going on for at least 2 or 3 months. 8 months. Dad's voice was hollow. That's when she started being so attentive about my medications. She said she wanted to make sure I was getting the best care possible. He laughed bitterly. I thought I was the luckiest man alive having a wife who cared so much about my health. She was preparing, Dad, building a pattern, establishing herself as the devoted caregiver so no one would question her when you died. And if you hadn't come home?
The question I'd been dreading. The medical examiner would have found an elderly man with a history of heart problems who died from what appeared to be medication complications. Carmen would have been the grieving widow who did everything possible to save her beloved husband. Dad was quiet for a long time, processing information that redefined his entire understanding of his marriage, his life, his reality. When he finally spoke, his voice was steady, but filled with a sadness that seemed to age him another decade. Where is she now? Las Vegas PD arrested her this morning. She's being transported back to Phoenix to face charges of attempted murder and elder abuse. Attempted murder. He repeated the words like he was learning a foreign language. My wife of 34 years attempted to murder me. Yes. Another long silence. Then, so quietly I almost missed it. Does she know that you figured it out? Not yet, but she will soon enough.
Dad nodded slowly, his engineer's mind already working through the logistics and implications. What happens now? Now you recover, you get healthy, you remember what it feels like to think clearly, to have energy, to not be constantly drugged into submission. I squeezed his hand. And you testify against the woman who tried to kill you. Testify against Carmen. He tested the phrase, then shook his head. 34 years, Bella. 34 years I've been married to a stranger. The morning sun streamed through the hospital window, illuminating a man who'd woken up to discover his entire life had been a lie. But for the first time since his admission, Dad's eyes were clear, his voice was strong, and his mind was sharp. The drugs were wearing off, and Daniel Conklin was coming back to life. Just in time to help put his would-be killer in prison. Detective Chen's call came at 11:47 a.m. while I was in the hospital cafeteria, forcing down a sandwich that tasted like cardboard and trying to process the fact that my mother was now officially a criminal defendant. The detective's voice was crisp, professional, but I could hear something underneath it. Satisfaction, maybe? Or relief that a predator had been caught. Miss Conklin, your mother is in custody. Las Vegas Metro arrested her at the Bellagio this morning around 9 a.m. Pacific time. She was at a buffet brunch with Victoria Reeves when officers approached their table. I tried to imagine the scene, Mom probably dressed in one of her vacation outfits, maybe telling Victoria about her jackpot wins, suddenly surrounded by police officers reading her rights, while casino patrons stared. The irony wasn't lost on me. She'd been caught at a feast after leaving her husband to starve. How did she react? According to the arresting officers, she was initially confused, then claimed there had been some mistake. She insisted she was on a planned vacation and that her husband was fine at home. When they informed her that Daniel was hospitalized and that she was being charged with attempted murder, she became volatile. Volatile. That was the polite way of describing what I imagined was a full Carmen Conklin meltdown. The same kind of theatrical outburst she'd perfected during my teenage years whenever someone questioned her version of events. Detective, what about Victoria Reeves? Was she arrested too? She's being questioned as a potential accessory. We found some interesting text message exchanges between them that suggest Ms. Reeves was more involved than we initially thought. Detective Chen paused, and I heard paper rustling. Miss Conklin, I need to prepare you for what we discovered in your mother's hotel room. The sandwich turned to ash in my mouth. What kind of things? Printed real estate listings for properties in Nevada and California, all in the price range your mother would have been able to afford with your father's life insurance payout. Travel brochures for European cruises, and a notebook with what appears to be a timeline for selling your parents' house and liquidating assets. She'd been planning her new life down to the smallest detail, probably spending evenings in that hotel room browsing luxury retirement communities and exotic vacation destinations, all funded by Dad's death money. There's more, Detective Chen continued. We also found a draft letter addressed to you, apparently intended to be mailed after your father's death. I think you should read it, but I want to warn you, it's going to be difficult. Send it to me. I'll email you a scan right now. I sat in that sterile cafeteria, surrounded by the quiet conversations of other families dealing with their own medical crises, and opened the email that would show me exactly how my mother had planned to manipulate me, even in the aftermath of murder. The letter was written in Mom's familiar handwriting on hotel stationery from the Bellagio. Dearest Isabella, I'm writing this with a broken heart to tell you that your father passed away peacefully in his sleep on Tuesday night. I found him this morning when I returned from Portland, where I'd been caring for Margaret after her hip surgery. The doctors say his heart simply gave out. All the medication and treatments couldn't save him in the end. I know this is devastating news, especially since you've been so busy with work and couldn't visit as often as you wanted. Please don't blame yourself, sweetheart. Your father understood that you had to build your career, and he was so proud of everything you've accomplished.
The funeral arrangements are being handled by Sunset Memorial. Your father always said he wanted something simple. I'll be staying with Margaret for a few more days to help her recover, but I'll be home by the weekend to take care of everything. I know you'll want to come home immediately, but there's no rush. Your father is at peace now, and the most important thing is that you remember him as he was, loving, proud, and completely devoted to his family. I love you so much, and I promise we'll get through this together. All my love, Mom. P.S. I've been thinking that after everything settles, I might take some time to travel and heal. Your father always wanted me to see Europe, and I think it would honor his memory to finally take that trip we never could afford together. I read the letter 3 times, each reading revealing new layers of manipulation and deception. Mom had crafted the perfect grieving widow narrative. She'd been caring for family when Dad died peacefully. She'd positioned my guilt about not visiting more often. She'd even set up her European escape as a tribute to Dad's memory. The most chilling part was how believable it was. If I'd received this letter, if I'd flown home to find Dad dead and Mom playing the devastated widow, I would have comforted her, helped her make arrangements, probably even supported her decision to travel and heal. I might have spent years feeling guilty about not spending more time with Dad, never knowing that more time with him would have meant less time for her to poison him. My phone buzzed with a text from Detective Chen. Your mother is being transported to Phoenix this afternoon. She'll be arraigned tomorrow morning. The prosecutor wants to meet with you and your father tonight to discuss the case. Tonight. Less than 24 hours after discovering Mom's betrayal, I'd be sitting across from a prosecutor helping build a case that would send my own mother to prison for attempted murder. I walked back to Dad's room in a daze, the letter still open on my phone. He was sitting up in bed, looking more alert than I had seen him since arriving, the dangerous drug cocktail finally clearing from his system. A physical therapist was helping him with some basic exercises, and for a moment, he looked like the father I remembered before his heart attack. Strong, engaged, present. "How are you feeling, Dad?" "Better. Clearer." He thanked the therapist and turned his full attention to me. "The nurse said Detective Chen called. Have they found your mother?" I showed him the letter, watching his face as he read his own fake obituary and his wife's plans for spending his death benefits. His expression cycled through disbelief, hurt, and finally a cold anger I'd never seen from him before. She had it all planned out, even how to manipulate you after I was gone. Dad, the prosecutor wants to meet with us tonight. This is really happening. Mom is going to be charged with attempting to kill you." He was quiet for a long moment, staring out the window at the Phoenix skyline. When he spoke, his voice was steady, resolved. Good. Because after reading that letter, I'm not sure the woman I married ever really existed. The Carmen I fell in love with 34 years ago wouldn't have been capable of this level of deception and cruelty. But the woman who wrote that letter, who drugged me and left me to die so she could take European vacations on my life insurance money, that woman needs to be in prison. The transformation was remarkable. In less than 24 hours, Dad had gone from a confused, drugged victim making excuses for his abuser to a clear-headed survivor ready to seek justice. Mom's biggest mistake wasn't leaving him alone to die. It was underestimating how strong he'd be once her chemical chains were broken. Tonight, we'd help the prosecutor understand exactly how close she'd come to committing the perfect murder. And tomorrow, Carmen Conklin would face the consequences of underestimating the man she'd spent months trying to kill. The Maricopa County Prosecutor's Office at 7 p.m. felt like a war room preparing for battle. Assistant District Attorney Michael Torres, a man in his 40s with the tired eyes of someone who'd seen too much human cruelty, had spread our case across a conference table like pieces of a puzzle that painted a picture no one wanted to see completed. Dad sat beside me in a wheelchair, still weak but mentally sharp for the first time in months. The contrast was startling. Yesterday, he'd been a confused, drugged shell of himself, and now he was asking pointed questions about evidence and legal procedures with the analytical mind that had made him a successful engineer for 30 years. "Mr. and Ms. Conklin, I want you to understand the gravity of what we're dealing with," ADA Torres began, pulling out a thick file. "Based on the evidence Detective Chen has compiled,
we're looking at charges of attempted murder in the first degree, elder abuse, fraud, and conspiracy. If convicted on all counts, your wife and mother could face 25 years to life in prison. Life in prison. The woman who taught me to braid friendship bracelets and helped me learn to drive could spend the rest of her days behind bars. I should have felt sadness, but all I could muster was a cold satisfaction that justice was finally within reach.
What role do you need us to play? Dad asked, his voice steady despite the circumstances. Mr. Conklin, you're our star witness. Your testimony about the timeline, the medications, your wife's behavior in the months leading up to her Vegas trip, that's what will prove premeditation and intent. Torres pulled at a timeline chart. But I need to warn both of you. The defense is going to try to paint Mrs. Conklin as a devoted wife who is overwhelmed by caregiving responsibilities. They'll claim the medication errors were mistakes, born of exhaustion and confusion. I thought about the detailed drug log found in Mom's bedroom, the calculated dosages, the internet searches about drug interactions. How do they explain away her research into life insurance payouts and selling the house? They'll say she was planning for the inevitable, preparing for your father's eventual death from his heart condition. The defense will argue that she was being responsible, not murderous. Torres leaned forward. That's why the Vegas trip is so crucial. It proves abandonment with intent to harm. Dad shifted in his wheelchair, his jaw tightening. Mr. Torres, I need you to understand something. My wife didn't make medication errors. Carmen is one of the most detail-oriented people I've ever known. She balanced our checkbook to the penny, organized our taxes with military precision, never forgot an appointment or missed a deadline in 34 years of marriage. If she was giving me the wrong medications, she knew exactly what she was doing. That's excellent testimony, Mr. Conklin. The jury needs to understand her personality, her competence, her attention to detail. Torres made notes. What about her relationship with Victoria Reeves? How long have they been friends? About 2 years. Victoria got divorced and moved to Las Vegas around the time Dad had his first heart attack. Mom started visiting her, taking weekend trips, coming back with stories about how free Victoria was, how she was living her best life without the burden of a husband. Torres's pen stopped moving. She used the word burden when referring to marriage? Multiple times. She'd talk about how lucky Victoria was to start over at 62, how she could travel anywhere, do anything without worrying about someone else's needs. The memory hit me like a slap. She said Victoria was an inspiration for women our age who felt trapped by their circumstances. Dad's hand clenched into a fist. She never said any of that to me. Around me, she was the devoted caregiver, constantly worried about my health, researching treatments, scheduling appointments. But she was telling you I was a burden. Mr. Conklin, we have evidence that suggests your wife and Mrs. Reeves were planning this together for months. Text messages, emails, phone records showing increased communication as your condition was being manipulated. Torres pulled out transcripts. Mrs. Reeves has agreed to cooperate in exchange for reduced charges. Her testimony is going to be devastating for your wife's defense. Victoria was cooperating. Mom's partner in planning murder was now going to be the key witness in her prosecution. There was a poetic justice in that betrayal. What exactly did Victoria tell you? Dad asked. Torres consulted his notes. According to Mrs. Reeves, your wife had been complaining about being stuck taking care of you for over a year. She felt cheated out of her golden years, resentful that she had to manage your medications and appointments while other women her age were traveling and enjoying retirement. But she chose that, Dad said quietly. After my heart attack, I suggested hiring a nurse, getting professional care. Carmen insisted she wanted to take care of me herself. She said it was her duty as my wife. According to Mrs. Reeves, that was a calculated decision.
Your wife knew that professional caregivers would notice medication irregularities or signs of abuse. By positioning herself as the devoted wife who refused outside help, she eliminated witnesses and created complete control over your care. The scope of Mom's planning was breathtaking. She hadn't just decided to kill Dad, she'd spent 2 years creating the perfect circumstances for murder. Torres continued reading from Victoria's statement. In February, your wife told Mrs. Reeves that she'd figured out how to solve her problem without getting caught. She said that men with heart conditions died all the time from medication complications, and that grieving widows rarely face scrutiny if they'd appeared to be providing good care. February. 7 months of planning, 7 months of gradually increasing the drugs that would make Dad weep and confused, 7 months of research and preparation for the Vegas trip that would serve as her alibi. There's something else, Torres said, his voice becoming more serious. Your wife had already picked out a retirement community in California and put down a deposit. She was that confident her plan would work. A retirement community. Mom had been so certain Dad would be dead by now that she'd already secured her new life. The betrayal kept getting deeper, more calculated, more cold-blooded. Mr. Torres, Dad said, his voice barely controlled, I want you to understand something. My wife didn't just try to kill me. She tortured me for months first. She made me think I was losing my mind, that my health was failing faster than expected, that I was becoming a burden on everyone around me. The psychological abuse was as deliberate as the physical poisoning. That's important testimony, Mr. Conklin. The jury needs to understand that this wasn't a mercy killing or a moment of desperation. This was systematic torture followed by attempted murder. Torres gathered his files, preparing to leave. One more thing. Your wife's arraignment is tomorrow morning at 9 a.m.
She'll likely plead not guilty and request bail. Given the severity of the charges and the fact that she fled to another state while her alleged victim was dying in the home, I doubt bail will be granted. But you should be prepared to see her in court. See her in court. Face to face with the woman who'd tried to kill Dad, who'd planned to inherit his money and spend it on European vacations while playing the grieving widow at his funeral. As we left the prosecutor's office, Dad turned to me in the hospital parking lot. Bella, I need you to know something. Whatever happens in that courtroom tomorrow, whatever your mother says or does, I'm not the same man she left to die in Las Vegas. Her drugs made me weak and confused, but they also made me complacent. I'm not complacent anymore. Looking at him in the desert twilight, I could see the difference. The man Mom had been slowly poisoning was gone, replaced by someone harder, clearer, and absolutely determined to see justice served. Tomorrow, Carmen Conklin would face the husband she'd tried to murder. And for the first time in months, he'd be strong enough to fight back. The Maricopa County Superior Court was buzzing with the kind of energy that only comes with high-profile criminal cases. News vans lined the street, reporters clutched coffee cups and notebooks, and I realized with a sick feeling that our family nightmare had become public entertainment. Local woman charged with attempted murder of husband while vacationing in Vegas was apparently the kind of story that drew crowds. Dad insisted on walking into the courthouse rather than using the wheelchair, even though he was still weak. I won't give her the satisfaction of seeing me helpless, he said, gripping my arm for support as we climbed the courthouse steps. Detective Chen met us at security, her expression grim. I need to prepare you both for what you're about to see, she said as we moved through the metal detectors. Your mother has been in county lockup for 18 hours. She's, not handling it well. That was Detective Chen's polite way of saying Mom was probably having the meltdown to end all meltdowns. Carmen Conklin had never spent a night anywhere less luxurious than a 3-star hotel, let alone a jail cell with a metal toilet and fluorescent lighting. Has she said anything about why she did it? I asked. She's maintaining her innocence. claims she was caring for a sick relative, that the Vegas posts were old photos, that her husband's condition is being exaggerated for sympathy. Detective Chen's expression darkened. She also demanded to know who turned her in and suggested that someone was trying to frame her for financial gain. Financial gain? Even now, facing life in prison, Mom was projecting her own motives onto others. The woman who'd planned to inherit Dad's life insurance and live off his death benefits was accusing someone else of being motivated by money. Courtroom 4B was smaller than I'd expected, but packed with people. ADA Torres sat at the prosecution table, surrounded by files and evidence boxes. Across the aisle, a public defender named Janet Walsh shuffled through papers with the resigned expression of someone about to defend the indefensible. And then there was Mom. I almost didn't recognize her. The woman who'd never left the house without perfect makeup and coordinated jewelry sat at the defendant's table in an orange jumpsuit, her hair unwashed, her face puffy from crying. She looked smaller somehow, diminished, like a deflated balloon that had once been bright and festival. When she saw us, her entire demeanor changed. The defeated prisoner disappeared, replaced by the manipulative mother I'd grown up with. She straightened in her chair, arranged her face into an expression of wounded innocence, and mouthed, "I love you," with tears streaming down her cheeks. Dad's grip on my arm tightened, but his expression remained stone-cold neutral. He stared at his wife of 34 years like she was a stranger who'd borrowed her face. All rise for the Honorable Judge Patricia Hendricks. Judge Hendricks was a no-nonsense woman in her 60s who'd clearly dealt with every type of criminal Phoenix had to offer. She reviewed the case file with efficient speed before addressing the courtroom. We're here for the arraignment of Carmen Elena Conklin, charged with attempted murder in the first degree, elder abuse, fraud, and conspiracy. How does the defendant plead? Public Defender Walsh stood up. Not guilty on all charges, Your Honor. Thank you. Now, regarding bail. Judge Hendricks pulled out another document. The prosecution has filed a motion to deny bail based on flight risk and danger to the victim, Mr. Torres. ADA Torres rose, his voice carrying clearly through the courtroom. Your Honor, the defendant fled the state while her alleged victim was dying alone in their home. She planned and executed what she believed would be the perfect murder with an out-of-state alibi. Phone records show she was planning this crime for months, researching murder methods and disposal of assets. She represents an extreme flight risk and a continued danger to Mr. Conklin. Judge Hendricks turned to the defense table. Miss Walsh, my client is a 62-year-old woman with no prior criminal record who was caring for her sick sister in Portland when this alleged incident occurred. The social media posts the prosecution references are old photos that were posted by mistake. Mrs. Conklin is devastated by the accusations and eager to clear her name. She requests reasonable bail so she can care for her husband during his recovery. Care for her husband. I had to bite my tongue to keep from laughing at the audacity. Mom was still trying to play the devoted wife angle even after being caught red-handed.
Judge Hendricks wasn't buying it either. Ms. Walsh, your client's internet search history includes queries about life insurance payouts, selling property, and drug interactions that could cause death. She withdrew money from their joint account to fund a Las Vegas vacation while her husband was allegedly dying. This doesn't sound like someone who is caring for a sick relative. Those searches can be explained, Your Honor. Mrs. Conklin was researching her husband's condition to better understand his prognosis. The Las Vegas trip was planned months in advance as a brief respite from caregiving duties. Planned months in advance while researching how to kill someone with heart medication? Judge Hendricks' tone could have frozen the desert. Mr. Torres, does the victim wish to make a statement regarding bail? ADA Torres nodded. Yes, Your Honor. Mr. Daniel Conklin is present and wishes to address the court. Dad stood up slowly, still gripping my arm for support, but his voice when he spoke was strong and clear. Your Honor, my wife systematically poisoned me for months while planning my death. She left me alone to die while she celebrated in Las Vegas with my life insurance money already spent in her mind. I am terrified of what she might do if released. She almost succeeded in killing me once. I don't want to give her a second chance." The courtroom was silent except for the soft sound of Mom crying. But these weren't the real tears of remorse. They were the calculated tears of someone playing for sympathy, the same performance she'd perfected during my childhood whenever she was caught in a lie. Judge Hendricks looked directly at Mom. "Mrs. Conklin, the evidence against you is substantial and the charges are severe. You allegedly attempted to murder your husband while establishing an alibi in another state. You represent both a flight risk and a danger to the victim." She banged her gavel with finality. "Bail is denied. The defendant will remain in custody pending trial. Trial date is set for January 15th. Court is adjourned." January 15th, 3 months away, 3 months for Mom to sit in a jail cell and think about how her perfect plan had fallen apart. As the bailiff led her away in shackles, Mom turned back toward us one last time. But instead of the loving mother or grieving wife performance, her mask finally slipped completely. The look she gave Dad was pure hatred, the look of someone whose carefully planned murder had been interrupted. "This isn't over, Daniel," she called out before the bailiff pulled her through the door. "You have no idea what you've done." The threat was clear, witnessed by a courtroom full of people. Even facing life in prison, Carmen Conklin wasn't done trying to intimidate the husband she'd failed to kill. But as we walked out of that courthouse into the Phoenix sunshine, Dad stood a little straighter, breathed a little easier. For the first time, maybe years, he was safe from the woman who'd promised to love and honor him until death do them part. She'd tried to arrange that death much sooner than expected. Now she'd have the rest of her life to regret that mistake. 3 weeks later, Dad was finally strong enough to come home, not to the house he'd shared with Mom, but to a temporary furnished apartment I'd rented across town while we figured out our next steps. The physical transformation was remarkable. Without the constant cocktail of drugs Mom had been feeding him, his mind was sharp, his energy was returning, and he'd gained back 15 pounds that I hadn't even realized he'd lost. But the emotional recovery was more complicated. "I keep expecting her to walk through the door," he admitted, on a Tuesday evening as we sat on the small apartment balcony, watching the sunset paint the desert mountains in shades of purple and gold. I'd taken an extended leave from my job in Seattle, officially to care for Dad during his recovery, but really because I couldn't bring myself to leave him alone. Not yet. Not when he was still processing the magnitude of Mom's betrayal and what it meant for the life he thought he was living. "Have you thought about what you want to do with the house?" I asked, carefully. We'd been avoiding the topic, but decisions had to be made. The home where Dad had nearly died, where Mom had stored her arsenal of drugs and planned his murder, sat empty like a crime scene monument to their ruined marriage. He said, "Sell it. I never want to set foot in that place again. Every room has memories of her taking care of me, and now I know that every pill she handed me, every meal she prepared, and every concerned look she gave me was part of her plan to kill me." He shook his head. "I can't live with those ghosts." We'd already hired a realtor and an estate sale company. The house would be cleared out, sanitized of 34 years of shared memories, and sold to help fund Dad's new life. A life where he could choose his own medications, prepare his own meals, and sleep without wondering if his caregiver was actually his would-be killer. "Detective Chen called today," I said, pulling out my phone. "Victoria Reeves is testifying to the grand jury tomorrow. Her cooperation deal is finalized." Dad's jaw tightened. Victoria had become almost as much of a villain in his mind as Mom. The friend who encouraged and enabled the murder plot, who'd helped plan the Vegas alibi, who'd celebrated with champagne while Dad lay on a bathroom floor dying. What's she getting out of the deal?
5 years for accessory to attempted murder with possible parole in 3. In exchange, she's giving them everything. Text messages, phone calls, the timeline of how they planned it, even details about the retirement community Mom had picked out in California. The prosecution had shared some of Victoria's testimony with us in preparation for trial. The details were staggering. Mom had shown Victoria photos of the drug combination she was using, had practiced her grieving widow performance via video calls,
had even discussed how to spend Dad's life insurance money while he was still alive. "You know what the worst part is?" Dad said quietly. "She was good at it. If you hadn't come home when you did, if Mrs. Rivera hadn't been paying attention, Carmen would have gotten away with it. She would have played the devastated widow, inherited everything, and moved to that retirement community in San Diego to start her new life." It was true. Mom's plan had been nearly flawless. The gradual poisoning that looked like natural health decline, the Vegas alibi that positioned her as a devoted wife taking a brief, well-deserved break, the fake story about caring for her sister, even the letter she'd written to me crafting the perfect narrative of Dad's peaceful death that would have eliminated any suspicion. "But she didn't get away with it," I reminded him. "Her plan failed because she underestimated how much people actually cared about you. Mrs. Rivera cared enough to call the police when something seemed wrong. Dr. Kellerman cared enough to recognize the signs of abuse. Detective Chen cared enough to investigate thoroughly. And you cared enough to drop everything and fly home when I needed you." It was the first time he'd really acknowledged what I'd sacrificed to save him. My career was on hold, my Seattle apartment sat empty, my entire life had been rearranged to help him rebuild from the ashes of Mom's betrayal. "Dad, there's something else we need to talk about. ADA Torres wants to know if you're prepared to testify at trial. It won't be easy. Mom's defense attorney is going to try to make you look confused, unreliable, maybe even complicit in your own abuse." Dad's expression hardened. "What do you mean complicit?" "They're going to argue that you were aware of the medication changes, that you willingly took drugs that weren't prescribed, that you were using Mom to help you commit suicide rather than face a declining quality of life." The accusation was as insulting as it was ridiculous, but defense attorneys in desperate situations tried desperate strategies. "They're going to paint me as suicidal?" Dad's voice was incredulous. "I was fighting to live every single day. I was calling for help when I fell, trying to get someone to notice that something was wrong. How is that suicidal?" "They'll say the confusion was from your heart condition, that the medications were things you asked for to help with pain and sleep issues. They'll make it sound like Mom was just being a loving wife who went along with your requests." Dad stood up from his chair, pacing the small balcony with more energy than I'd seen from him since before his first heart attack. The physical strength wasn't the only thing returning. His fighting spirit was coming back too. "Let them try," he said firmly. "I spent 34 years believing Carmen was the love of my life. I trusted her with my medications, my meals, my life. I made excuses for her behavior even when she was actively trying to kill me. But I'm not confused anymore, and I'm not going to let her lawyers rewrite history to save her skin." He turned to face me, and I saw something in his eyes I hadn't seen in years. Determination, clarity, and absolute resolve. "Bella, I'm not just going to testify against your mother. I'm going to make sure that jury understands exactly what she did to me, how she planned it, and how close she came to getting away with the perfect murder. She wanted me dead so badly she was willing to spend months torturing me first. Now, she's going to spend the rest of her life in prison thinking about how she failed." The transformation was complete. The confused, drugged victim was gone, replaced by a man who'd survived an assassination attempt and was ready to see his would-be killer face justice. Mom had created the perfect plan to destroy Dad's life and steal his future. Instead, she'd destroyed her own life and given him something he'd lost years ago: the strength to fight back. In January, Carmen Conklin would face a jury of her peers and try to explain why a devoted wife would systematically poison her husband while planning European vacations with his death benefits. But she wouldn't just be facing the confused, trusting man she'd left to die in Las Vegas. She'd be facing the clear-minded survivor who remembered everything she'd done to him and who was finally strong enough to make her pay for it. 6 months after that terrible night when I flew home to find Dad dying alone, I stood in the gallery of Maricopa County Superior Court watching Carmen Conklin, the woman I could no longer think of as my mother, be sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole.
The trial had lasted 3 weeks and felt like a public autopsy of our family. Victoria Reeves had testified for 2 days, methodically describing how Mom had planned every detail of Dad's murder, from researching the perfect drug combinations to practicing her grief performance via video calls. The prosecution had presented Mom's internet search history, her drug logs, the fake letter she'd written to me, and dozens of text messages between her and Victoria discussing their new beginning once Daniel's situation was resolved.
But it was Dad's testimony that sealed her fate. For 4 hours, he sat in that witness chair and calmly, methodically, devastatingly described what it felt like to be slowly poisoned by the person you trusted most. He talked about the increasing confusion, the weakness that he'd attributed to his heart condition, the growing sense that something was wrong but not being able to identify what. He described calling Mom's name from that bathroom floor, believing she was in the house somewhere, not knowing she was 400 miles away celebrating his impending death with champagne and slot machines. The defendant didn't just try to kill me, he'd told the jury in a voice that carried to every corner of the courtroom. She made me complicit in my own murder by convincing me that the drugs she was giving me were helping when they were actually killing me slowly. She turned my love for her into a weapon against myself. The defense had tried everything, claiming Mom was overwhelmed by caregiving duties, suggesting Dad was suicidal and had manipulated her into helping him, even arguing that the Vegas trip was a coincidence and Dad's collapse was due to natural causes. But the evidence was overwhelming, and Victoria's cooperation had provided a window into the meticulous planning that made any claim of accident or mercy impossible to believe. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. Now, watching the bailiff lead Mom away in shackles for the last time, I felt something I hadn't expected. Not satisfaction or revenge, but a profound sense of closure. The woman who'd tried to destroy Dad's life had instead destroyed her own, and justice had finally been served. Miss Conklin, I turned to find ADA Torres approaching with a satisfied expression. I wanted to thank you and your father for your courage throughout this process. Cases like this only succeed when family members are willing to step forward and seek justice rather than protect the perpetrator. Thank you for believing us, and for making sure she'll never hurt anyone again. Dad was waiting for me in the hallway, looking tired but relieved. The trial had been emotionally exhausting, forcing him to relive months of systematic abuse while watching the woman he'd loved for 34 years try to convince a jury that she'd been caring for him rather than trying to kill him. "How are you feeling?" I asked as we walked toward the courthouse exit. "Free," he said simply. "For the first time in years, I feel completely free." And he looked it. The physical transformation over the past 6 months had been remarkable. He'd gained weight, his color had returned, his mind was sharp and clear, but the emotional transformation was even more profound. The anxious, dependent man Mom had been creating with her chemical cocktail was gone, replaced by someone stronger and more self-assured than I'd seen since before his first heart attack. "What's next?" I asked as we stepped into the Phoenix sunshine. "Well, the house sold last week, so I'm officially homeless," he said with a smile that would have been impossible 6 months ago. "But I've been thinking about that retirement community in Tucson we looked at. The one with the woodworking shop and the hiking trails?" We'd spent several weekends exploring Dad's options for his new life. After 34 years in the same house, the same routine, the same marriage, he was finally free to choose what he wanted rather than what someone else was planning for him. "And I have been thinking about something else," he continued as we reached my car. "Your mother spent months researching how to kill me and get away with it. Maybe I should spend some time researching how to help other people recognize the signs of what happened to me." "What do you mean?" "Elder abuse, financial exploitation, medical manipulation, it's more common than people think. Most victims don't survive to testify like I did. Maybe I can help other families recognize the warning signs before it's too late."
The idea of Dad turning his nightmare into a way to help others was both inspiring and perfectly characteristic of the man he'd always been under Mom's chemical suppression. She'd tried to erase his compassion and strength, but they'd returned stronger than ever. "I think that's a wonderful idea," I said. "You could work with Detective Chen, maybe speak to medical professionals about recognizing the signs." Actually, I already talked to her about it. She's connected me with a group that trains healthcare workers and social services on elder abuse recognition. They want me to tell my story. As we drove through Phoenix toward Dad's temporary apartment, soon to be replaced by a permanent home he'd chosen for himself, I reflected on how completely our lives had changed. 6 months ago, I was a successful software developer in Seattle, focused on my career and taking my family's stability for granted. Now I was planning to relocate to Arizona permanently, using my savings to help Dad build his new life while we both learned to navigate a world without the woman who'd shaped both our identities for decades. But the change wasn't loss. It was liberation. "Dad, can I ask you something that's been bothering me?" "Of course." "Do you think there were signs earlier that we missed? Things that might have warned us what she was capable of?" He was quiet for a long moment, considering the question that had haunted both of us throughout the trial. "I think your mother was always capable of this level of manipulation and cruelty, but I also think life gave her opportunities to hide it. She was charming, organized, seemingly devoted. She knew how to play the role people expected her to play." "So we couldn't have known?"
We could have known if we'd been looking for it, but why would we? When you love someone, when you trust them completely, you don't investigate their motives or question their care. That trust is what makes this kind of betrayal possible. He paused. The question isn't whether we should have seen it coming. The question is what we do now that we know what she was capable of. What we did now was live. Dad would move to Tucson, pursue his advocacy work, maybe even find love again with someone who actually deserved his trust. I would build a new career that allowed me to stay close to him while we both healed from the trauma of discovering that our family was built on lies. And somewhere in a maximum security prison, Carmen Conklin would spend the rest of her life thinking about the Vegas jackpot that cost her everything, the perfect murder that wasn't quite perfect enough, and the husband she'd underestimated until it was too late. If you've ever had to choose between protecting a family secret and seeking justice, if you've ever realized that the people closest to you are capable of unimaginable betrayal, drop a comment below. Tell me how you found the strength to do what was right, even when it meant destroying everything you thought you knew about your life. Like this video if you believe that sometimes the people who hurt us most are the ones who teach us what real strength looks like. Subscribe for more stories about survival, justice, and learning that family isn't always about blood. Sometimes it's about who shows up when you need them most. Because in the end, Mom was right about one thing. It was time for new beginnings. She just never imagined they'd start with her in handcuffs and Dad finally free to live the life she'd been trying to steal from him. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.